Sisters, brothers, colleagues, I'm very honoured this morning to introduce to you our next speaker, Dr. Mary Hatwood-Futrell. You will know something about Mary from the speaker's biographical notes in your conference reader. She has been Dean of the George Washington University's Graduate School of Education and Human Development. She is a member of the US National Commission for UNESCO, and she's a member and been a member of many important and influential boards. Mary overcame poverty, racial discrimination, and discrimination because of her gender to become president of the National Education Association, an education union in the United States, our affiliate, one of our affiliates with over 3 million members. And when Education International was formed in 1993, she became the founding president. They are some of the reasons why it is so important for us to hear from Mary today. But I want to tell you another reason why I think it is so important for us to hear from her. Mary has always understood and actively advocated for education unions and their members to be not only industrial organisations fighting for wages and working conditions, but for us to be leaders and voices of the teaching profession, advocating for quality education for all. This is so crucial today, as the teaching profession is too often blamed for all that is wrong with our education system, but something that Mary understood decades ago. As well, Mary is a leader whose actions reflect her beliefs. She's always and still supports women, fighting for the spaces for women in our organisations to be able to discuss and plan and develop our own strategies, advocating for policies which reflect the needs of women and girls in education, in unions and in society. We are indeed privileged to have Mary with us today, and I hope and I know that you will listen to her words very closely. Welcome, Mary.
Well, first of all, good morning. And let me say to you that it is indeed an honor and a pleasure to be here. And I simply want to congratulate Education International for sponsoring the second Women's Conference. And I think I want to also thank the people who organized the conference and the speakers and the moderators. It's been very inspiring, it's been very engaging, very challenging, and very informative. But what I'd like to do this morning for the brief time I have before you is to ask that we step back for a few moments to look at where we were and then look at where we want to go. I want to take us back to the 1980s, and I want you to know we've come a long way since that time. And I remember when I was a member of the board of the World Confederation of the Teaching Profession, and it was very, very unusual to have an item on the agenda that dealt specifically with issues related to gender, related to girls, and related to women. And it was highly unusual to have a conference like this. I don't recall us ever having a meeting like this. And remember when I attended my second WCOTP conference, and Sheena Hanley from Canada, who later became the Deputy General Secretary at EI, and I, along with a few of the other women there, decided we were going to form a women's caucus because we were tired of the fact that women did not have a voice. And so we formed the caucus, and the men heard about it. And so they came to the meeting, and they tried to take over. And we said, no, this is for women. And so we decided to have closed meetings and not to let them know where we were holding those meetings, because we wanted the women to feel comfortable talking about issues that they wanted to raise, issues related to gender, education, and being part of the trade union. And so we began to encourage women to go out and to talk. And by the way, the men told the women that if we hear that you go to any more of those meetings, you will not come to any more WCOTP assemblies, and you will not be invited to any meetings at the national level. And so the women were intimidated. They were threatened. And so that was part of why we decided to have the closed sessions. But as we began to meet over the next couple of years, the women gained more confidence and more authority. And they said, we're going to speak out. And they would go on the floor of the assembly, and they would bring up issues related to gender. And we began to pass policies relating to gender and education as it relates to girls. And after a few years, we decided to open it up and let the men come in. But they came as observers. And we said, we want them to come because we want you to understand the issues we are facing every single day, and how important those issues are, not simply to us, but to our society as a whole. We did it because we wanted them to understand, but we also knew that we needed their help. We needed their support if we were going to be successful in moving forward with our agenda. And it worked. It worked. Women began to speak out on the floor of the assembly. They began to serve on more committees. They began to put policies forward. We began to focus more on issues related to girls and women. And that strategy worked also as it related to us eventually coming together to form Education International. And we met with the International Federation of Free Trade Unions, and when we negotiated the merger, one of the things that we said is we wanted to make sure that there's equality within this new merged organization. And so as we worked with the negotiating team, and I was on it, and several others in this room probably served on it as well, but we wanted to make sure that we had women's representation at an equitable level on the board, the executive committee, and on the staff. And we said to them we want to create a position for Deputy General Secretary that focuses on gender-related issues, and we were able to do that. And Sheena Hanley from Canada was the first person to serve in that position. And when I look back at EI and what we've accomplished, we are a model for other unions and professional organizations all across the world. We are a model. And when I think about Education International and what we have accomplished, it began when we said to people, you have a voice and you have the right to stand up and to speak out and to be heard. You have the right to be respected. You have the right as a citizen, as a teacher, as a union member, and giving them the confidence and giving them the opportunity to do so. But I want you to know that the leadership that we have is not simply internal, but I'm very, very honored that the leadership within EI is also recognized externally as well. And I'm proud of the fact that Susan Hopgood, who is the president of EI, serves on the UN General Secretary's Global Education First Initiative Board. That's a powerful position. And I'm glad that Lily Escalon Garcia, who is the Vice President of the National Education Association, represents EI's advisory committee on the OECD Education Advisory Board. That's a powerful position. And it means EI has a voice. And I'm proud of the fact that the UN Girls of Education Initiative is coordinating its efforts with EI, and together we're working to achieve the goal of education for all. And it helps EI build relationships all around the world with different organizations. And basically the message is, it's not just EI who should be concerned about this issue. The whole world should be concerned about this issue. And we're reaching out beyond our borders and reaching out to try to work with others. But there's still room for improvement. You know, sometimes people say if it's not broken, why do you have to fix it? And I tell them all the time, simply because something isn't broken doesn't mean you can't make it better. And so EI is strong, but how do we make it even better? How do we come together and rejuvenate the organization and cause it to move forward in an even more powerful way? And I think that we do that by having the kinds of meetings we're having right here. and saying to EI, it's not just about what happens in Brussels, it's what happens all over the world and all of your member organizations. That's where it happens. And equally important, I'm proud to say that EI is recognized all over the world as one of the most powerful advocates for children, and especially for the rights of girls to be educated. And when I think about EI, I think about the work we've done with the UNESCO and Education for All, and we spent over 2 decades now since the EFA was passed back in 1990. And the goal was that we wanted to universalize the rights of everyone in the world to be educated. To universalize education, meaning that every single human being has the right to be educated. Well, unfortunately, we're not going to meet that goal by 2015. It's 2014 right now, and we're not going to make the goal. And I was afraid that they might walk away and say, we tried, we didn't work, so we'll give up. But what UNESCO has said is we're not going to give up. And what they've received is a turbo boost, and from the Global First Education Initiative, in which they've incorporated the goals of EFA and trying to make sure that girls receive quality education. And by doing that, especially by looking at goal number 2, which focuses on universal primary education, and I wish they had said education at all levels, but primary, we'll go with that. And goal 6, which focuses on general equity. And we hope that this will rejuvenate the movement to try to make sure that girls everywhere in the world have the right to be educated. And UNESCO has been joined by OECD, they've been joined by the UN, they've been joined by EI and other groups coming together because they finally realize that unless we educate all the children in the world, we are holding a deficit, because we have children across the world who don't have the knowledge and the background that they need in order to be successful in life. And yes, it will take all of us coming together, working together to achieve this goal. And just as previous generations joined together to ensure that each of us in this room, and you know, when I was writing this, I thought about something. How many of you received your education through public education? I want you to just raise your hand. You know what you're saying? If somebody somewhere had not stood up and fought for you to get an education, you wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be here. And there's a quote that I like, and I'd like to share it with you. It says, we build on foundations we did not lay. We drink from wells that we did not dig. And we stand on the shoulders of those who pioneered, paved the way, and labored for all that we enjoy today. Somebody somewhere a long time ago that we don't know fought for everything that we enjoy today. And one of the things for which they fought was the right for us to have an education, to be educated. And we must continue moving forward with efforts to guarantee every child's right to learn, to be educated. EFA is still here, and with your continued commitment, we can achieve it. And I will submit to you, we as a global society cannot afford not to achieve EFA for every single child in the world. We cannot afford not to achieve it. When I think about our society today, I think about the fact that what the lady said on Monday. She said 750 million people in the world are illiterate. That's 10% of all the people in the world. And approximately 100 million people do not have access to a place called school. And most of them are girls and women. Do not have access. And you know, you stop to think, we take for granted the fact that we get up and our children will go to school. We take it for granted. But there are places in the world where they don't have schools. And I think to myself, this is 2014 and there are no schools? How could that be? And when I see those statistics, I ask myself a question: why not? Why not? Why don't these young people have the right to go to school? I ask myself, why, especially in the 21st century, are communities still unable to provide or are denying people, particularly women and girls, the simple, basic right to go to school and to be educated? Why are there countries today where women and girls are being beaten, they're being raped, and they're being killed simply because they want to be educated? Why? Now, some would say it's because of abject poverty. They don't have the resources. They can't afford it. I would submit to you, maybe they need to relook at their budget and their priorities and to determine whether or not they do have the resources to do it. If they have the resources to do everything else they want to do, why can't they educate the children? Why not? And I would submit to you that basic truth, I believe, is because it's discrimination because we're talking about women and girls. I think it's because of gender. And when people are educated, they are more empowered to stand up for themselves, more empowered to fight for their rights and to be free and to dare to dream and to realize those dreams. And it's more difficult to oppress and control them. The best way to control somebody is not to educate them. That's how you control them. And if you want to free them, you educate them. That's what you do. And when I think about the people today, when I was a child, you see, I was one of those poor kids growing up in a southern state in the United States of America. And a lot of people would say to me, you're not going anywhere because your family's poor. You're not going anywhere. But I remember my family telling my sisters and myself, make sure you get a good education, do everything you can. And I'm going to tell you the truth, sometimes I wanted to walk away because I thought, I'm so poor, I can't do this. And I remember my mother sitting down and saying to me, and she would hold my face, and she would say to me, she said, make sure you do your very best to get education, and I know you can do it. I know you can do it. And she would say to me, people can take away your car. They can take away your house. They can take away your material belongings, but they can never take your education away from you. They can never take it away. Never. And I look back and I thank God that I listened to what my teachers and my family and the community said, and I thank my community for providing an education for me. And I wouldn't be standing here, I wouldn't have accomplished the things I've accomplished in my life if I had not had the opportunity to go to school and to be educated. And my nieces and my nephews and my grandchildren, sometimes they get upset with me because I really push them to get an education. Educate yourself. And they say, okay, my name is Mary Alice. We hear you. I said, don't just hear me, do it. Do it. And so when we think about what it would be like to not have an education, I can't even imagine it. My own experiences showed me that even when I was very young and very poor, how education can transform a person's life. If it can enable people to remove barriers that you never thought you could remove, barriers related to poverty, illiteracy, discrimination. It can free people to develop potential they never dreamed that they had. Never dreamed that they had. And it can enable people to have a better quality of life for themselves and for their families. And a recent study by UNESCO entitled Women's Education and Women's Political Participation found that in countries where people are denied the right to be educated, the opportunity to be educated, they are less likely to participate in society, less likely to be involved in politics. And however, what they found was when women and people are involved in education, they focused on women. They said that educating women, even at the most basic level, has the potential to raise women's participation in democracy, both as voters and as policymakers. And they said when more women are involved in the government, There's more focus on health, education, and more focus on less violence, and especially against women. And what that study, and others like it say to me, is there are no more excuses. We need to stop looking for excuses and solve the problem. That's what we need to do. We need to come up with the money and the resources to provide education for every single child on the face of this earth, and stop trying to get around it. And when I think about this topic, I said we must end blatant violation of the rights of girls and women to be educated, and that we should have the same basic educational rights as our brothers and as our male counterparts. And it all starts with making sure that every nation lives up to its commitment, that every child will be guaranteed equal access to a quality education. And the most influential part of that process is to make sure that they have teachers who are well qualified, and to make sure that those teachers have the support and the resources that they need to do the job that they've been hired to do. And I think another part of that is to make sure that we make sure that those teachers have a repertoire of pedagogical skills to teach the diverse student population that they will have in their classroom. Because all children are not alike. But I tell people all the time, simply because a child is poor doesn't mean the child can't learn. Doesn't mean that. You may have to use some different strategies, but they can learn. And as we look at this, we need to make sure that when we teach these children, we don't judge them, but we teach them regardless of their gender, regardless of sexual orientation, regardless of socioeconomic status, religious beliefs, race, or ethnicity. Teach them. And teach them to believe in who they are and to have the knowledge and the skills and the disposition to be successful in life. I think we need to make sure that in those schools we have a clearly defined curriculum as to what it is we're trying to teach, how we're going to teach it, and that we have the resources and we have the means to do so. I believe that as we teach those children, it means assuring that schools are safe, that children are not subjected to abuse, whether it's bullying or sexual abuse or whatever, and they have basic things like safe bathrooms they can go to. And a lot of girls, I'm sure, their parents don't want to send them to school because they don't have separate bathrooms. That's not a reason not to go to school. Build a bathroom. As the 21st century continues to evolve, it is becoming more obvious that those nations that invest in education will not only survive, but they will thrive. And I heard an interesting comment the other day, and I want to share it with those of you who weren't there. They said for every dollar we invest in education, the return is $6. That's a 600% return. So how could you not be willing to invest in education? And so when we invest in quality education, the community becomes better, the community becomes stronger, as well as the individual becoming stronger. We need to make sure that they have the understanding and the skills and the values they need to be more engaged in the community and to help us have more civil societies and to help us have social justice. We need to make sure that they have the background that they have in order to resolve the interconnected challenges that we're going to be facing in the 21st century, and that we live in peace. It's a small world now. It's not a big world. We can communicate, we can travel all around the world in just a couple of days. It's a small world. So how do we help people understand the global society in which they live? How do we help them have the skills and the knowledge to help them to be able to thrive within that society? So we've made progress. I think we've made a lot of progress. But we still need to scale up our efforts exponentially. Our actions must measure up to our ambitions, and this will require a greater commitment from all of us, and especially from EI and its members and its leaders. And EI and its member organizations, by approving and implementing its education in the post-2015 Global Development Framework, continues to be a leader on the front line, working to assure that the goal of education for all, that educational equity becomes a reality. However, to achieve that goal, especially as it relates to gender equity, requires education, especially teachers and organizations that represent them, to be key players locally, nationally, and internationally. So it's not just EI who has to do the work. The national organizations have to do the work. The local organizations have to do the work. We have to be involved at every single level of the process, of the system. And in defining what must be done to assure education is at the highest level of excellence. And we talk a lot about testing. We talk a lot about accountability. Well, accountability has been around for about 300 or 400 years. It's not new. It just keeps bubbling up. But how do we define what we mean by accountability? How do we help define what should be happening in the school? How do we define what the curriculum should be, how we should assess whether students are learning, and how teachers should be prepared? We have to be part of that process. EI is a union, but it's also a professional organization. And the two have to come together. And it's the same story at the national level as well. And so when I think about where we are, we need to continue to reach out beyond our classrooms and our unions to the broader community. And as you well know, the struggle will not be easy. In the global climate of increased attacks on education unions all over the world, and especially in the United States of America, and increased attacks on teachers, demeaning teachers. And I said to somebody the other day, if we want people to join the profession, we have to stop demeaning the teachers. We have to stop putting them down. You have to treat them with respect and treat them like professionals and pay them like professionals. That's what we have to do. And so I think that we have to also make sure that we help people understand that by attacking the education system, they're not solving the problem, they're making the problem worse. And rather than try to destroy the education system, what do we need to do to make it better? And how can we work together to make it better? And I think that we have to stand up and speak out. We can't sit back and just say, oh, this is happening, there's nothing we can do. We have to do something, and we have to do it now. We can't wait. Equity must be reflected at every level of our education system, but it must also be reflected within our unions. It must be reflected in our organizational policies and programs and the structure of the governance of our organizations. And we cannot say that we support equity, but then turn our backs when we see inequities regarding working conditions within our own schools and within our own organizations. In other words, you can't just talk the talk, you got to walk the walk. That's what you got to do. And so when we think about education and where we're going, we have to make sure that we invite young people to become more involved in the organization. And let me say to my senior citizens, and I'm a senior citizen, sometimes it's hard to let go. But if we really believe in this organization and in our national organization, we have to bring the young people into the organization, not just as members, but as leaders in the organization as well. We have to do that. And so, women in trade unions and in education from words to action underscores the fact that we are key players, but we're also stakeholders in this movement. As union members and leaders, by coming together and working together, sharing our skills and experiences, respecting the talents and the ideas we bring to the table, bring to the dialogue, we can achieve the goal of gender equity within our society and also within our organization. And the more we build on the vision, the wisdom, and the leadership strength of all of our members, especially our young members, the stronger we will be. And now I want to go back to where I started as I bring this to a close. And I want you to listen very carefully. We build on foundations we did not lay. We drink from wells we never dug. We profit from persons we did not know. And we stand on the shoulders of those who pioneered, paved the way, and labored for everything that we enjoy today. We stand on the shoulders of those giants. The mantra is being handed to you, and you will be asked to continue to move it forward. And it's going to rest on your shoulders, not just for a year or two, but probably for decades to come. The decades to come. It's on your shoulders, and it was on my shoulders, and on the shoulders of future generations. And what we need to understand is we need the voice of all of our members, females and males, young and old, teachers in the classroom as well as the drivers of the school buses. We need the voices of people at the primary level, the secondary level, and the higher education level to be involved in this whole discussion, this whole movement. And we need to stand up and speak as one voice, one entity for equity and equality for all. We need to unite to continue advocating for our union rights, but we need to equally importantly, we need to advocate for educational and human rights for all. The most basic human right of all is education. So that voice is your voice, the voice of every person in this room, coming together collectively to advocate for education, human rights, social justice, union rights. That voice is Education International. You are Education International. Again, thank you for inviting me to come. I wish you safe travels, and thank you for all that you do on behalf of the children of the world. Thank you.
Mary, at the beginning I said that everyone would listen to you very, very carefully, and I know that they did. You have inspired us. You have challenged us. And you've reminded us of the giants that came before us and whose shoulders that we stand on. But let me tell you, every person in this room knows that you are one of those giants and that we are standing on your shoulders. And so let me thank you for everything that you have done in your working lifetime. Thank you.